There is a place within each of us that few ever truly visit. A realm not found in the world around us, but in the still waters of our own mind. This is where depth begins. Thought is not merely the act of processing information. It is the art of reflection, of looking inward, of tracing the contours of our own consciousness. And in that reflection, we begin to see something extraordinary, that the depth of our thoughts mirrors the depth of our soul. Most people live on the surface, responding to the noise of life, echoing opinions, chasing distractions that keep them from silence. But those who dare to descend beneath the surface begin to perceive a hidden dimension of reality. The deep thinker does not fear solitude, for they know that in solitude the mind begins to reveal its true landscape. It is here, away from the world's constant noise, that one begins to hear the whisper of the soul, subtle, elusive, yet profoundly transformative. To think deeply is to hold a mirror before the self, and this mirror reflects not what we wish to see, but what truly exists. It reveals the contradictions, the unhealed wounds, the desires we hide behind smiles, and the truths we bury beneath routine. It demands honesty, and honesty is the first step toward depth. The shallow mind avoids discomfort, but the deep mind leans into it, recognizing that every fragment of pain, every shadow of fear is a doorway into greater understanding. There is a quiet courage in those who dare to think beyond convenience. The mind that questions is often lonely, for depth sets one apart. Yet this separation is sacred, for it invites one into communion with the unseen layers of being. The deep thinker begins to notice patterns where others see coincidence, meaning where others see chaos, and unity where others see separation. They begin to realize that life itself is a conversation between the conscious and the unconscious, between what we know and what we have yet to remember. The soul does not speak in logic, it speaks in symbols, in feelings, in the quiet intuition that arises when the intellect grows still. Deep thought is the bridge between the rational and the mystical. It is the process by which the unseen becomes visible, where imagination and insight merge into wisdom. The deeper the thought, the clearer the reflection of the soul. In this reflection, one discovers that knowledge alone is not enough. It must be transformed into understanding, and understanding into self-awareness. Those who dwell in depth know that clarity often comes after confusion and wisdom after wandering. They are not afraid of their own complexity because they understand that the mind's contradictions are not flaws but pathways. The journey inward is not linear, it spirals. Each return to the same thought brings new meaning. Each question reveals a deeper layer of truth. The mind becomes an ocean, vast and alive, with waves of emotion and undercurrents of intuition flowing endlessly beneath the surface. To gaze deeply into thought is to encounter both light and shadow, the parts of ourselves we celebrate and the parts we suppress. The shadow does not vanish. When ignored, it grows. But when we bring it into awareness, it transforms. This is why deep thinkers often wrestle with darkness. Not because they are lost within it, but because they understand that illumination is born through confrontation. The deeper one ventures into the self, the more radiant the soul becomes. And so, the depth of thought is not measured by complexity, but by sincerity. It is not about thinking more, but about thinking truly, stripping away illusion until only essence remains. To think deeply is to love truth more than comfort, to seek meaning rather than validation, to ask questions that have no easy answers. Such thought transforms the mind into a mirror, one that does not distort but reflects with precision the image of who we really are. When a person begins to see their own reflection clearly, they no longer mistake the world for the self or the self for the world. They realize that every judgment reveals their inner landscape, every emotion traces back to a thought, and every thought is a seed planted in the soil of the soul. Through this awareness, they begin to cultivate their inner world with intention, watering the seeds of insight and weeding out the roots of ignorance. The depth of thought, then, is the soul's greatest revelation, the proof that consciousness is not static, but ever evolving. Each deep reflection reshapes us, refining our perception, widening our compassion, and aligning us closer to the essence of who we are meant to become. Through thought, the soul remembers itself, and through the soul, thought finds its infinite depth. There comes a time in every life when the noise of the world becomes too loud to hear one's own soul. The endless conversations, the constant notifications, the demands for attention, all pull us away from the quiet truth within. It is in this moment that solitude calls, not as an escape, but as a return. For solitude is not loneliness. It is the sacred forge where the fragments of our thoughts, emotions, and experiences melt together and become wisdom. Those who fear solitude misunderstand it. They see it as emptiness, as absence, as silence too heavy to bear, but those who have walked into it know otherwise. Solitude is not the absence of life, it is the amplification of life's essence. When the distractions fade, when the eyes turn inward, the mind begins to whisper things it has long buried. Truth does not scream, it murmurs. And only in stillness can it be heard. The mind in solitude becomes a mirror, reflecting without distortion. Every thought that arises in that quiet space is unfiltered, pure, unmasked. We begin to see not just what we think, but why we think it. The opinions we borrowed from others begin to lose their hold. The false identities we wear, the ones built to please, to impress, to belong, begin to dissolve. In their place emerges something raw and honest, the self unshaped by applause or rejection. In solitude, time changes its rhythm. The moments stretch wider, and within that widening, we rediscover depth. The hurried pace of the world teaches us to skim across the surface of existence, to chase rather than contemplate. But solitude invites us to slow down, to sink, to feel the texture of our own being. It is in these pauses that wisdom begins to take shape, because wisdom is born not from accumulation, but from awareness. Every great transformation begins in isolation. The seed must be buried in darkness before it becomes a tree. The artist withdraws into silence before creation flows. The thinker retreats from the crowd before understanding arises. Solitude, then, is the crucible, the place where fire meets form, where raw experience is refined into insight. What feels like separation from the world is, in truth, an initiation into a deeper connection with it. In solitude, we learn to listen, not to others, but to the undercurrent of our own consciousness. We hear the faint echoes of memory, the sigh of long suppressed desires, the quiet rhythm of intuition guiding us toward what feels authentic. This listening is not easy. At first, it is uncomfortable, even frightening. The silence seems too vast, too empty. But with time, it becomes a sanctuary. The noise of the outer world fades, and the inner world comes alive. The deep soul does not grow through constant interaction, but through reflective stillness. Solitude sharpens perception. It teaches us to see without distraction, to feel without distortion, to think without interference. We begin to notice the subtle, the emotion behind a thought, the energy beneath an action, the truth hidden within contradiction. This is the wisdom solitude offers the ability to perceive the unseen patterns that govern both mind and world. Yet solitude also tests us. It shows us the parts of ourselves we avoid, the insecurities, the fears, the old wounds still aching beneath the surface. In the company of others, we can hide them. In solitude, they rise. But rather than running, the wise one watches. Each discomfort becomes a teacher, each silence a revelation. Slowly, the chaos within begins to order itself. The fragments align, the fog lifts. What remains is clarity, the kind that no book or teacher can provide. True solitude is not isolation from humanity, it is communion with the essence of life. It strips away the illusions that separate us from meaning. When the self is purified through stillness, we begin to see the world with new eyes. Compassion deepens. Understanding expands. The noise that once overwhelmed now reveals its harmony. Through solitude, we learn that wisdom is not the collection of answers, but the deepening of perception. The world often celebrates those who speak loudly, who act boldly, who fill space with movement. But the one who can dwell in stillness, who can sit with their own thoughts without fleeing, holds a strength few ever find. Solitude refines the soul like fire refines gold. It burns away the excess, leaving only what is true. It is here that purpose is rediscovered, creativity rekindled, and understanding reborn. Those who embrace solitude become their own companions, their own guides, their own teachers. They learn that the mind, when freed from the noise of the world, becomes its own universe. And in that universe, wisdom is not found. It is forged through stillness, through silence, through the patient unfolding of the soul. There is a language older than speech, one that predates logic, culture, and civilization itself. It is the language of the unconscious, a silent dialect of images, sensations, and symbols that communicates directly to the soul. The unconscious does not reason, it reveals. It does not explain, it shows. Every dream, every impulse, every sudden fear or fascination carries within it a symbol, a message from the deeper layers of the mind, translated not into words, but into meaning felt beneath thought. Most people mistake this symbolic language for chaos. They dismiss dreams as nonsense, intuition as coincidence, emotion as weakness. But to those who look closer, these fragments of the unconscious form a map, not of the external world, but of the inner one. The mind, in its depths, does not operate through sentences and grammar. It expresses through metaphor, image, and pattern. It speaks in the language of myth, the same language that ancient storytellers once used to describe the mysteries of existence. Symbols are the bridge between the conscious and the unconscious. They allow the infinite to speak to the finite. When an image rises from the depths, a storm, a serpent, a child, a flame, it carries with it more than its surface meaning. It carries an emotion, a truth, a part of the self not yet understood. To the unconscious, the snake might not be an animal. It might be transformation, fear, desire, or renewal. The mountain might not be stone, but aspiration. The ocean might not be water, but the vast, untamed totality of the psyche itself. This is why dreams matter. The dream is the stage where the unconscious performs its truths in symbolic form. While the waking mind obeys reason, the dreaming mind obeys emotion. It reveals not what we think, but what we truly feel. The dream bypasses the intellect and speaks straight to the essence. Every recurring dream, every haunting image, every moment that lingers after waking is a message written in the symbolic script of the soul. The difficulty lies in interpretation. Words can lie, but symbols rarely do, yet they are never literal. To interpret a symbol is to enter into dialogue with oneself. It requires patience, humility, and imagination. One must learn to listen not to the surface of the image, but to its resonance. The heart recognizes what the intellect denies. The image that stirs emotion is the one that carries meaning. The unconscious does not argue, it reflects. And what it reflects is the totality of who we are. Not just the parts we show to the world, but also the forgotten, the wounded, the divine. When we ignore symbols, we silence the soul. When we chase logic alone, we lose touch with the deeper rhythm of being. The world then becomes mechanical, stripped of wonder and significance. But when we learn to see symbolically, life begins to speak again. A coincidence becomes a message, a song becomes a sign, a memory becomes a key. What once seemed ordinary becomes charged with presence, as if reality itself were alive with meaning. This is not superstition, it is perception deepened. Every culture throughout history has understood this truth. Myths, rituals, art, and religion. All are expressions of the unconscious made visible. They are the mind's attempt to make sense of its own infinity. The gods of ancient stories are not external forces, but inner archetypes, patterns of thought, emotion, and instinct that live within every human being. When a story of struggle, rebirth, or heroism moves us, it is not because it entertains, but because it mirrors something within. The unconscious recognizes its own reflection in the myths of the world. The symbols of the unconscious do not belong to one person, they belong to all. They are universal, yet deeply personal in meaning. The sun, for instance, has shone as a symbol of consciousness across countless traditions, or yet for each soul it represents something unique, perhaps growth, truth, or illumination. The unconscious tailors its language to the individual, yet it speaks through symbols shared by all humanity. This paradox is what makes the psyche both intimate and cosmic at once. To engage with symbols is to engage with the mystery of existence itself. It requires one to step beyond analysis and into experience, to feel what the image evokes rather than dissect it into pieces. The intellect may understand facts, but the unconscious reveals wisdom. Through symbols, it guides us toward integration, the union of what we know with what we have forgotten. Every image that rises unbidden is an invitation to look within, to see not the world as it appears, but as it is reflected through the mirror of the inner self. The unconscious never stops speaking. It murmurs through dreams, through art, through intuition, through the patterns of our lives that repeat until we finally pay attention. It is the hidden script beneath our actions, the invisible thread weaving together thought and destiny. To listen to it is to begin to remember a truth that words can never fully capture, a truth that can only be seen through the living language of symbols. To travel into the depths of the self is not a gentle descent, it is a confrontation. The deeper we go, the more we encounter the parts of ourselves that we have spent a lifetime avoiding. These hidden aspects, the impulses, fears, and desires that contradict our ideal image, form what psychology calls the shadow. It is not evil, nor is it to be destroyed. The shadow is the container of everything we deny, repress, or reject. and it waits in the darkness for acknowledgement. Depth cannot exist without this meeting. To know oneself, one must be willing to face what lurks behind the mask. The surface of life encourages denial. Society rewards the persona, the polished, acceptable self we show to the world. We are taught to be agreeable, to seek approval, to hide what is inconvenient or uncomfortable. But beneath this farce, lies the truth of our being, the envy, the resentment, the shame, the longing, the pain. These are the exiled fragments of the soul, cast out in our pursuit of perfection. Yet what we suppress does not vanish, it waits. The more we repress, the more power the shadow gains over us. It shapes our reactions, our relationships, our choices, silently steering us from beneath awareness. To confront the shadow is to break this silent control. It begins when we stop running from discomfort and start observing it. Every irritation we feel toward another, every pattern we repeat despite our intentions, every moment of jealousy or rage, these are mirrors reflecting what lies unhealed within us. The shadow speaks through projection. What we despise in others often reveals what we cannot accept in ourselves. To see this requires humility, for the ego resists exposure. It clings to its image of goodness, fearing that acknowledgement of darkness will destroy it. But the opposite is true. Facing the shadow does not weaken us, it liberates us. The process is not intellectual. It is emotional, visceral, and deeply human. It requires us to feel what we have long buried. Grief, guilt, fear, anger, emotions we once labeled as negative, become guides. They are not enemies, but messengers from the depths, each carrying a piece of truth. When we allow these feelings to surface without judgment, they begin to dissolve their hold. The darkness loses its teeth when brought into awareness. What was once terrifying becomes integrated, and integration is the foundation of wholeness. Depth cannot exist without this integration, because depth is not accumulation, it is authenticity. To think deeply, to feel deeply, to live deeply demands that we stop fragmenting ourselves. The shadow confrontation reunites the divided parts of the psyche. It transforms opposition into harmony. The self becomes multidimensional, capable of both light and dark, both vulnerability and strength. Without shadow work, depth remains an illusion, a surface imitation of wisdom. Without the courage of self-awareness, the journey into the shadow is not a single revelation, but an ongoing dialogue. Each stage of growth reveals new layers of unconscious material waiting to be seen. As awareness expands, so does responsibility. We begin to notice how our unacknowledged pain seeps into our words, how our fear of rejection molds our behavior, how our desire for control disguises itself as virtue. The shadow teaches us that every judgment we cast outward is an opportunity to look inward. The enemy we condemn often reflects the part of ourselves we have yet to understand. In the darkness, paradox becomes truth. The very traits we once called flaws often conceal hidden strengths. Anger may hide passion, fear may hide sensitivity, pride may hide wounded dignity. When reclaimed consciously, these qualities become sources of power. The shadow does not need to be destroyed, but transformed. It is raw energy waiting to be molded by awareness. Those who refuse this inner work remain prisoners of their unconscious. Those who accept it become creators of their own reality. To descend into one's shadow is to enter sacred territory. It is where light meets limitation, where consciousness meets chaos. The deeper we go, the clearer we see that darkness is not the opposite of light, but its complement. The night sky does not compete with the stars, it reveals them. In the same way, our flaws and fears give meaning to our virtues. Compassion grows not from purity, but from recognition, from knowing that we too are capable of what we judge in others. Depth requires this confrontation, because without it, thought remains detached from experience. True wisdom does not arise from theory, it arises from transformation. The one who has walked through their own darkness sees the world differently, not through the lens of condemnation, but of understanding. They recognize in every struggle a mirror of their own. The shadow ceases to be an enemy and becomes a teacher, a companion on the path toward wholeness. When we meet our shadow with awareness, we reclaim the energy once spent on hiding. Creativity awakens, empathy deepens, authenticity returns. The inner conflict that once divided us becomes a source of harmony. What was fragmented becomes whole, and what was once feared becomes the foundation of true depth. Beneath the surface of ordinary awareness lies a vast and intricate landscape, a world constructed not by external forces, but by the mind itself. Every perception, every emotion, every interpretation of reality is filtered through the architecture of consciousness. The deep mind does not merely respond to the world, it shapes it. It weaves meaning into chaos, turns experience into story, and transforms the unseen into the real. To understand this is to realize that our inner world does not mirror reality. It creates it. The ordinary mind lives reactively. It moves from one stimulus to another, shaped by circumstance, opinion, and collective noise. But the deep mind moves differently. It is not content with surface impressions, it digs beneath them. It questions, interprets, and imagines. It reconstructs the raw material of experience into patterns that reflect its own truth. When the deep mind awakens, it stops asking, "What is happening to me?" and begins to ask, "What is this teaching me?" In that shift, the power of creation begins. Every human being carries within them a private universe, a world of memories, dreams, fears, and symbols that no one else can see. This world becomes the lens through which reality is perceived. Two people may walk through the same city, see the same sky, and yet inhabit completely different worlds, because what they see is filtered through the architecture of their own thought. The deep mind knows this and begins to build consciously, shaping its inner structures with awareness rather than habit. It learns that thought is not passive, it is generative. Every belief forms a wall or a window in the mind's interior world. When we observe our thoughts without resistance, we begin to see their creative power. Every image we hold shapes the atmosphere of our perception. When the mind fixates on fear, the world appears threatening. When it orients toward meaning, the world reveals connection. The deep mind understands that perception is participation, that what we see depends on the level of consciousness from which we are seeing. The outer world is not fixed, it bends to the quality of the inner gaze. This is why depth matters. Shallow thinking builds worlds of repetition, where everything is reduced to comfort or avoidance. But deep thinking builds worlds of possibility, where even pain becomes purposeful. The deep mind does not escape suffering, it transforms it. It looks at loss and asks what it reveals, looks at chaos and asks what it teaches, looks at endings and asks what they are making room for. Every reflection becomes an act of creation. The deep mind turns wounds into wisdom and solitude into structure. There is an alchemy in this process. An invisible art through which the raw material of experience becomes the architecture of consciousness. The mind begins to align with deeper principles, meaning, growth, balance, and truth. It sees that reality is not merely external, but reciprocal, that the inner and outer worlds mirror each other like opposite sides of the same flame. When thought deepens, perception changes, and when perception changes, so does reality. The deep mind thus becomes not just an observer of life, but a co-creator of it. This inner world is not an illusion. It is the foundation upon which all experience rests. Every invention, every philosophy, every work of art was first born in the deep mind of someone who dared to see differently. The dreamer, the poet, the thinker, they all live in dimensions that the surface mind cannot perceive. Their visions do not arise from nowhere. They emerge from the depths where imagination and insight intertwine. The outer world eventually reflects what the inner world has already conceived. To build one's inner world consciously is to take responsibility for one's reality. It means cultivating awareness of the stories we tell ourselves, the meanings we assign, and the emotions we nurture. The deep mind does not wait for the world to provide clarity. It generates clarity from within. It questions assumptions, dismantles illusions, and rebuilds with intention. Through contemplation, silence, and self-reflection, it reorders the chaos of thought into structure, a structure strong enough to hold truth. But creation is never comfortable. To build from depth means to destroy what is false. It requires confronting beliefs inherited from fear, expectations shaped by others, and attachments that prevent authenticity. The deep mind knows that destruction is part of creation, that every ending clears the space for new form. This is why introspection feels like both loss and liberation. The old world must dissolve for a new one to emerge. The deeper the mind goes, the more fluid reality becomes. Certainties fade, but awareness expands. The world ceases to be fixed and begins to reveal itself as living, responsive, and symbolic. Every experience becomes dialogue. Every encounter becomes reflection. The deep mind sees not just objects, but energy, not just events, but patterns, not just time, but transformation. It recognizes itself in the movement of the world, not as separate, but as creator and created intertwined. The deep mind builds its world through attention. Whatever it attends to grows in significance. Whatever it ignores fades from existence. Attention, then, is the tool of creation. They're the invisible hand shaping reality from within. When attention is fragmented, the world appears chaotic. When attention is centered, the world aligns. The deep mind learns to focus not on control, but on coherence, to bring all thought, emotion, and perception into harmony with purpose. In the end, the deep mind understands that the world outside is only as rich as the world within. The landscapes we walk, the people we meet, the challenges we face, all echo the structure of our own consciousness. The deeper we build inwardly, the more expansive life becomes, and through that expansion, we begin to glimpse the truth that the mind is not confined to the body, nor thought to language, but is itself the unseen architect of all reality